Welcome into First Alert Forward. I'm David Amilati alongside Nathan Vickers, and pretty excited to be sitting with you because, as you might already know, we launched Forward last Monday. And so we thought we would take a couple of minutes and sit down and talk about how that's gone, and thought it'd be a good idea to kind of talk through the first week of the stories that we did and also kind of refresh you on our mission.
That's right. And our mission is to highlight people, projects, ideas that are helping to uplift St. Louis, to help it move forward, to grow together. And we wanted to start by talking about our most recent episode.
Last Thursday, St. Louis announced plans to take control of nearly 100 blighted properties near the new NGA St. Louis site in North City. A majority of them are properties tied to Paul McKee's Northside Regeneration LLC. The company has held on to a lot of these for decades, and in some cases, these vacant buildings take up chunks of city blocks in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood.
Then on Thursday, I sat down with Mayor Cara Spencer to talk about the city approaching that blight and removing that blight. I also talked about her larger vision for helping the St. Louis region to move forward. Why was it important for the city to move forward with acquiring these properties through eminent domain?
You know, when you have vacant, abandoned parcels, they are not only a blight and really hard on communities, but they really have a very negative fiscal impact on the city as a whole. And so they're a drain on community, and these are properties that have been languishing for far too long. This is an important first step in really revitalizing an area that is in bad need of revitalization.
We've talked a lot over the years about that impact. How have you seen those properties impact some of those neighborhoods on the north side in your time as alderman and as mayor? Oh man,
so vacant properties have been an enormous challenge for the city as long as I've been in office, and for decades really. We have just an enormous number of vacant parcels, many of which, like these, are held by private owners, and it's like being held hostage by a property owner that is really refusing to invest in the property. And when you're a neighbor to one of these parcels, or even kind of on the same block or in the same community, it is, again, not only demoralizing, it really impacts your own property value, your own ability to invest in your own property. And so it's really brought down, the level of vacancy has really brought down entire communities.
What is the city's capacity to take on an additional 90 properties, if not 1,600 eventually? I mean, the city already has so many properties that are vacant that the city has. What's the capacity to hold those and to stabilize those? And then what's the long-term plan?
The city does not have the capacity to take on thousands more, hundreds more properties. And that's why we started with this first phase of 89 properties. And the goal here is really to create some contiguous properties within a larger community that creates some critical masses. And this allows us to move forward with redevelopment of specific areas in a contiguous manner, which makes those redevelopment proposals much more feasible.
Mr. McKee has said that he's one of the only ones who's invested in the north side and has even tried to do anything at all. How have you seen that narrative kind of shift over the years, or what do you think of that assertion?
It's been frustrating. The majority of these properties have languished under ownership there, and I'll just say I think it's time to move forward, and it's time to put the past behind us and move forward with a new vision for St. Louis, in particular in North St. Louis.
I think it's a good segue into the project we've been working on this week about moving St. Louis forward. Just speaking generally, what does it take to move St. Louis forward?
Well, it takes some bold action sometimes and some tough decisions and some, I would say a vision for what's possible. And we've got to have, some feasible opportunities for investment. The city of St. Louis does not have the funds to redevelop all of the vacancy in our city alone. We have to have private investment. And in order to get that private investment organically, we've got to seed some of that. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is seeding some development. But we've got to have a proposal that makes sense for the private investor to come in. And that's where we're putting together these contiguous, finite tranches of land that make sense, that we believe have the capacity to attract that private investment to come alongside of the public's push here.
More than one developer told us this week that they feel like something that holds back investment in the city is red tape and outdated zoning policies. What do you think about that?
I think they're right, and that is exactly why we're working on those things. We've got the ZOOP, the new zoning proposal that the Planning Division has been working on for well over a year now. That is coming to fruition. It's going to be the first time in my lifetime the city has updated its zoning districts and how we approach zoning in the city of St. Louis. It's going to make it a lot easier to get through, eliminating a lot of the need for the Board of Adjustment and some of these other hurdles that are just enormous. Adds an enormous amount of time to getting a proposal, a project online.
One thing that came out of this week's stories just generally is that St. Louis is as a region in a unique position at a unique time. Our regional population is stagnating, and we may stand at the precipice of a demographic winter, and yet there seems to be an optimism here about the ability to come out of that. How can St. Louis as a region work together to overcome that, and where do you see St. Louis going?
I do. I feel that optimism. You know, when I meet with other leaders throughout the region where there has historically been hostility, there's an openness, a willingness, a recognition that unless we start really working together, that stagnation you talked about is going to be the future. We all recognize that we'll be better off if we're working together. I feel that not only in the St. Louis region, but at the state level. I spent yesterday in Jefferson City meeting with our governor's team and a whole host of stakeholders, representatives from across the state who recognize how important St. Louis, the region, is to the state's GDP. And it's not just St. Louis that's stagnating, it's Missouri. But we have partners across the state that are ready to address those silos and work together. And that is just a recipe that we haven't seen before. We haven't seen the region ready and recognizing that in order to succeed, we've all got to come together, and the state being a partner there as well. We've got a governor that is just so supportive of St. Louis and recognizes how important we are, and that has really pervaded Jefferson City in a very positive way. And while, you know, look, I'm the first to admit I disagree politically with the majority of folks in Jefferson City, but there is a recognition that we have a lot of mutual interest when it comes to the economic growth of St. Louis region, and we're here to work together on those areas of alignment.